Hello everyone, my name is David Lutchford and welcome to lesson 53 of my Ancient Greek course. In today's lesson we're going to be learning about personal pronouns and possessive adjectives. In particular, we're going to be learning about the first and second person pronouns and the corresponding possessive adjectives, because we already know about the third person pronouns, as I shall explain. But before we talk about the first and second person pronouns and the corresponding possessive adjectives, let us take a look at my virtual shelves. If we do that, we shall see that Francesco, DK, Someone, and Christine have recently supported my channel by buying virtual amphorae. Francesco, Someone, and Christine have supported my channel in the past, so they're continuing to support my channel, and DK is supporting my channel for the very first time. So welcome to the club, DK, and thank you very much for supporting my channel. And thank you very much, Francesco, Someone, and Christine, for continuing to support my channel. I greatly appreciate the support. In addition, I should say that I greatly appreciate the support of everyone who has ever supported my channel. Thank you all so much for this marvellous collection of virtual amphorae. Now, on this set of shelves, on this shelf in particular, you will know, if you've watched my other videos, that we have a seasonal item. An item according to the season or the celebration that's happening at the time of making this video, or at the time of this video's release. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is Saturday the 28th of June. And do you know what the 28th of June is? It's National Insurance Awareness Day. That's right. I'm sure you knew that. It's National Insurance Awareness Day. And so, we have this television screen here with the picture of the guy holding up a sign saying, "Are you covered?" on it. He's reminding you to check whether you're properly covered when it comes to insurance. Is your car insured? Is your house insured? Is your property in general insured? Do think about that this National Insurance Awareness Day, which is Saturday the 28th of June, which is today if you're watching this video on the day of its release. Okay, speaking of which, happy National Insurance Awareness Day. You know, if I had a sponsor, I would put an advert here. That is, if the sponsor were an insurance company. You know, if an insurance company sponsored me, then this would be the perfect opportunity to plug that sponsor. But alas, no insurance company has sponsored my Ancient Greek channel. What a great shame. Or perhaps it's not a shame, because insurance and sponsors, it's all kind of dystopian, isn't it? You know, if I did have a sponsor here, it would be like, go to this insurance company's website and use the code "We live in a dystopia" for 20% off your home insurance. Anyway, thank you all very much for supporting my channel. I greatly appreciate all of these beautiful amphorae very much. And I'm continually inspired by the messages you send with your amphorae and your comments, your likes, and your subscriptions. So if you do like these videos, please do be sure to like, to subscribe, and to leave a comment if you have anything to say about them. Moreover, if you would like to add a virtual amphora or virtual amphorae to my virtual shelves, then you can do so at the link in the description below. But let's now talk about personal pronouns in Greek. And let me begin by saying what pronouns are in general. Pronouns are words that stand in the place of nouns. In English, The personal pronouns are I/me, you singular, he/him, she/her, it, we/us, you plural, and they/them. Now, in English, we have the same word for you singular and you plural. We just say you. Americans say y'all for you plural, but in formal English, we do just have the word you for both you singular, that is you when you're speaking to one person, and you plural, that is you when you're speaking to multiple people. However, in Greek, these two are separate words. So we do need to bear in mind that there is this distinction between you singular and you plural in Greek, even if there visually isn't in English. And we can indicate which you we're working with by putting either S for singular or PL for plural in brackets after it. In your translations, however, you don't have to state that, you'll just translate it as you in either case. The other thing to note is that in English, most of the personal pronouns have actually kept a different form for the accusative case. When I say kept, I mean they haven't lost their inflection. That is, they haven't lost their cases. This is one of the places where English still has cases. Me is the accusative form of the pronoun I. Him is the accusative form of the pronoun he. Her is the accusative form of the pronoun she. Us is the accusative form of the pronoun we. And them is the accusative form of the pronoun they. If you think about it, we say the first of these two forms, the I form, for instance, the he form, and so forth, when that person is the subject of the sentence. That's the nominative form. However, the second form, me, him, her, etc., is the accusative form. We use those when the person is the direct object. That's why we say, I see him. But if we invert it, we say, he sees me. So those are the personal pronouns in English. And in English, we have to use the nominative forms of these pronouns to let the person we're speaking to know who is doing the action of a verb. For instance, we can't just say runs, we need to say he runs. And we can't just say run, unless it's as an imperative. There needs to be a person doing the action. And we specify that using the nominative form of one of these pronouns. So I run, for example, or you run. However, you can indicate which person is doing the action of a verb in Greek simply by using the appropriate person ending of the verb. You don't have to use the nominative form of one of the personal pronouns in Greek. For example, the word treche means he, she, or it runs or is running. We know that he, she, or it is doing the action from the ending alone. We don't have to use the nominative form of the personal pronoun separately, unlike in English where we have to put he, she, or it before the verb. However, the Greeks did also have separate words for the personal pronouns. And the nominative forms of these pronouns were used only for emphasis. So, there are words for I/me, for you singular, etc. in Greek, and they do have cases. They change their form according to which case they're in. Their nominative forms were only used for emphasis, because you can indicate who's doing an action from the person ending of the verb alone. So if you're including the nominative form of the pronoun as well, then you're doing that for emphasis. Sometimes that emphasis can be reflected in English by putting the pronoun in italics in your translation. However, sometimes it's so weak that we can't reasonably put the pronoun in italics without it sounding unnatural. So sometimes we can reflect the emphasis in English, other times we can't. Now let's talk about how the personal pronouns look in Greek, starting with the third person pronouns, namely he/him, she/her, it, and they/them. We already know how the third person pronouns look in Greek. That's some good news, right? We know that if we want to say he, she, it, or they, then we need to use a nominative form of houtos or ekainos. That is, if we want to use a separate word for he, she, it, or they, we can use a nominative form of one of the two demonstrative pronouns. Literally, houtos used on its own would mean this man, or in the feminine, this woman, etc. But it and its partner, ekainos, can be used as pronouns, meaning he, she, it, or, in the plural, they. Now, if we want to say him, her, it, or them, then the standard way of doing this would be to use a form of the word autos other than the nominative, since the nominative is only used for emphasis to mean himself, herself, etc., or as the adjective meaning the same. It's not used to mean he, she, it, or they. To do that, we need to use a nominative form of houtos or ekainos. However, if we want to say him, her, it, or them in the accusative, for example, or in one of the other cases like the genitive or the dative, the genitive would be of him, of her, etc., which we could say as his, her, etc., like his sword, her table, for example. There is another way we can say him, her, it, or them, and that is by using a form of houtos or ekainos other than the nominative. That would be a bit more emphatic than using a form of autos apart from the nominative. So, we already know how the third person pronouns look in ancient Greek. What about the first person and second person pronouns in Greek? Well, the word for I/me is egor. Egor. We have seen this in my lessons before, but we haven't properly learned about it until now. Egor is the nominative form of the word, so it would just mean I. However, we shall see its other forms in a moment, and those can mean me. Okay? So that's why I've summarized the word as meaning I/me, but note that this particular nominative form will just mean I. And if you transliterated egor, then you would get ego. And that's where we get the word ego from, and words like egomaniac, egotistical, etc. Next, the word for you singular in ancient Greek is su. Su. Su means you singular. Once again, it does decline. We shall see all of its forms in a moment. If you know French, the French for you singular is tu, so that might help you to remember that su is you singular. Or, if you know Latin, another ancient language, then you will know that the word for you singular in Latin is also tu. So that could help you to remember that su, a similar sounding word, means you singular. The word for we, or us, in the forms following the nominative, is ἡμεῖς. ἡμεῖς. This is the nominative form, so it just means we in this form, but in the other forms, it means us. Of course, in the genitive, it will be of us, in the dative, to or for us, but us would be the word that's used as opposed to we in the other cases. Finally, we have the word for you plural, which is ὑμεῖς. Ὑμεῖς, with a long upsilon with a rough breathing at the start. So we've got ἡμεῖς, meaning we or us, and ὑμεῖς, meaning you plural. They only differ in virtue of their first letter. So do watch out for that slight difference to avoid confusing them. Please do pause the video and note down these pronouns and their meanings. Okay, we're now going to learn how εγώ, σου, ἡμεῖς, and ὑμεῖς decline. Let us start with εγώ, meaning I or me. We would use the word I in the nominative and me in the other cases. In Greek, the nominative form, as we know, is εγώ. The accusative form is either me or ήμαι. Ήμαι is an emphatic version of me. So if you want to say me in the accusative, and you want to really emphasize it, like saying, "Are you really picking on me?" for example, then you would use ήμαι. And that would tend to come earlier in the sentence as well for emphasis. However, if you just want to say me in the regular sense, without emphasizing it, then that would be me. The genitive form of εγώ is μου. Μου. So that means of me. And it does have an emphatic equivalent as well. Its emphatic version is έμου. So once again, we've added epsilon to the start to make an emphatic version. We might remember that by thinking emphasis. We've got an e at the start for emphasis. So since these are genitive, these would mean of me. In the dative, it's moi, and the emphatic version is έμοι. Once again, we just add epsilon to the start of the regular version to make it an emphatic addition. So these are the forms of εγώ. Okay? Εγώ, με, μου, moi. Or to go the emphatic route, εγώ, έμαι, έμου, έμοι. Now I can give you some tips for learning these forms by heart. The nominative can be remembered because it gives us the word ego. If somebody's egotistical, then they think, I am the center of the universe. It's all about me. So that's how we might remember that εγώ is the nominative, the standard form of this pronoun. And the accusative we can remember by remembering that it's the same as the accusative form in English. The accusative form in English is me. In Greek, it's me. It's the same. And we can remember that the emphatic forms just add epsilon to the regular forms, to the beginning of the regular forms, that is. So that's how we can remember that the accusative form is me, by remembering that it's the same as in English, me, and the emphatic version is going to be ήμαι, since we just add an epsilon to the start of that regular form. The genitive form is μου. Now this we can learn by noting that ου is a genitive ending that we've seen elsewhere. Can you think of where else we've seen ου as a genitive ending? To reveal the answer, we have seen ου as a genitive ending in the declension of 1D nouns like nautes and like despotes and neanias. They both have ου in the genitive singular. We've also seen it as a genitive ending in the second declension. 2A and 2B nouns both have ου in the genitive singular. Likewise, we've seen the dative ending iota elsewhere. In the first and second declensions, all of the dative singular endings have iota subscript. In the third declension, iota is used as the dative singular ending. Now you might think, what about the omicron before it? You might just have to remember to carry that over from the genitive, which we know is μου. So if we've learned the genitive, we can remember to keep the O, and that the dative ending is iota, which is a very common dative ending, whether it's subscript or a regular iota. And like I said, we can remember that the emphatic versions just add epsilon to the start of the regular versions. So that is the pronoun εγώ, meaning I or me. Next, let's do the pronoun su. Its nominative form, as we know, is su. Its accusative form is se. Its genitive form is su. And its dative form is soy. Can you see how we might find it easy to remember this one, having learned how egor declines? Egor goes egor, me, mu, moi. Su goes su, se, su, soy. It uses the same endings as the regular forms of egor following the nominative, apart from the fact that su has sigma as the stem rather than mu. We've still got e, u, oi in both instances. So that should make it very easy to remember the forms of su, which means you singular. We will translate both the nominative and the accusative just as you, but we know that it's you singular to be precise. The genitive would be of you, and the dative would be to you or for you. Next, let us go through the declension of ἡμεῖς, meaning we or us. We know that the nominative form is ἡμεῖς. The accusative form is ἡμας. We would translate the nominative as we, the accusative as us. The genitive is ἡμών, that means of us. And the dative is ἡμεῖν, that is to us or for us. Now, one thing to note is that this alpha and this iota do always have a circumflex above them. So they are long vowels. So this is ἡμας and ἡμεῖν, a long alpha and a long iota due to the circumflex, which you can't see in my videos because I am not including accents. Not just yet, at least. Anyway, how might we remember these different forms? Well, we've got the stem hem in each of the cases, but we need a way of remembering each of the endings. We might do that by noting that we have seen all of these endings elsewhere too, but in different places. We've seen the ending ỵμεῖς be used in the nominative plural of some noun declensions, like, for example, the declension of 3D nouns. Trieres, meaning trireme, is triereis in the nominative plural. What about this ending as? Well, we've seen the ending alpha sigma in the first declension in the accusative plural. For instance, boer, meaning shout, is boas in the accusative plural. That's the accusative plural ending throughout the first declension. We've also seen the ending us with a short alpha in the third declension, in particular in the standard set of masculine and feminine third declension endings. It goes s, us. It's s, epsilon sigma in the nominative plural and us in the accusative plural. So we've seen this ending in a few places. The ending on we've seen in loads of places when it comes to the genitive plural. In fact, every single genitive plural form in Greek ends in on. So if we remember that the word we or us is a plural word, it's the first person plural pronoun, then we can remember that the genitive form of this plural pronoun is the same in terms of its ending as all of the other genitive plural words in Greek. And the dative, ἡμεῖν, uses the ending ήν, which we've kind of seen in the dative. We've seen the ending in with a short iota in the dative, but that's only part of it. We've seen the ending sin in the third declension. In the third declension, the dative plural forms all end in sin. The sigma sometimes contracts with another letter though. Anyway, we do have in as the dative plural ending in the third declension. The difference here though is the new is not movable. Now, I have some good news for you when it comes to ὑμεῖς, meaning you plural. We know the nominative form is ἡμεῖς, and to show you the other forms, the accusative is ἡμας, the genitive is ἡμών, and the dative is ὑμεῖν. If you've learned the declension of ἡμεῖς, meaning we/us, then you will easily be able to remember the declension of ὑμεῖς, since it uses the exact same endings. Now, just to be precise about how we would translate these forms of ἡμεῖς, the nominative form will be translated as you, but we understand that's you plural. The accusative form would also be you in English. The genitive would be of you, and the dative would be to or for you. However, there are other uses of the genitive and the dative, so do bear that in mind. You might see one of these pronouns, for instance, being used with a preposition, which governs the genitive or dative. And there, the usual meaning of in the case of the genitive, or the usual meanings of to or for in the case of the dative, wouldn't apply, because that word would just be being put in that case by the preposition. It wouldn't have its ordinary case meaning. And there are other uses of the cases as well that we will meet in the future. One that I can mention now, that we have already met in fact, is how the dative might be used with particular verbs. For instance, the verb to trust, pisteuo, takes its object in the dative case. There, the dative doesn't have the meaning of to or for, it's just the object of pisteuo, which takes the dative rather than the accusative, because you give your trust to someone. That's the conceptual explanation of why it takes its object in the dative rather than the accusative. Now, please do pause the video and note down the declensions of these personal pronouns. Let's now look at some examples of these pronouns being used in sentences. Here we have the Greek sentence, ego men oinon pino su de hudor pines. This means, on the one hand, I, and I say it like that because this is the nominative form, so it's being used for emphasis. On the one hand, I am drinking or drink wine. De, elided here because the next word begins with a vowel. On the other hand, you, singular, pines, drink or are drinking hudor, water. So this means I drink wine, but you drink water. And you can see I've reflected the emphasis by putting the pronouns in italics. Sometimes you can do that, other times you can't. But the reason I've done it here is because these nominative pronouns have been used just for emphasis, because you could drop these pronouns from the sentence and we would have to correct the word order after that, but it would say almost the same thing. It would say, I drink wine, but you drink water. The only reason these nominative forms of the pronouns have been used is for emphasis, because we could have just indicated who's doing the action with these verb person endings. So the nominative forms are just for emphasis, which we can sometimes reflect in English with italics, sometimes we can't though. Let's do another sentence. Her corre me pile, dora moi ai didosin. This says, the girl loves me. Then we've got didorsin as the verb in the next sentence, meaning he, she, or it gives. Dora means gifts. It's the plural version of doron. In particular here it's accusative plural. It can't be nominative plural because it's not going to be the gifts give. It's going to be she, the subject of the last sentence, the girl. She, I, always gives gifts moi. Moi is the dative form of ego, so it means to me. So it says, She always gives gifts to me. It might sound more natural to put the me before the direct object, in which case we drop the word to in English. We would say, she always gives me gifts. So this says, the girl loves me, she always gives me gifts. Thirdly, we have, ἡμεῖς μεν έσμεν ατενaioi, ὑμεῖς deste lakedaimonioi. This says, on the one hand, we are Athenians. On the other hand, you, plural, are Spartans. So we've got a contrast here, and we've got the nominative forms of the pronouns being used for emphasis. So we could translate it by saying, we are Athenians, but you are Spartans. Finally, we have the sentence, dia tiu legete tauta ἡμεῖν, ὑμεῖς garantei oikiai hemon este. This says, why do you not say these things, tauta, being used on its own, these things, it might be more appropriate in some contexts to say this if they're just speaking about one thing, but it literally says these things. ἡμεῖν. ἡμεῖν is the dative form of ἡμεῖς, so it means to us. So this says, why do you not say these things to us? Or why don't you tell us these things? Gar, for, ὑμεῖς, you, este, you plural are, ente oikiai, in the house, hemon. Hemon, the genitive of ἡμεῖς, of us. So literally it says, for you are in the house of us. We will more naturally translate that as, for you are in our house. The genitive of the personal pronouns can be used to indicate possession, to mean my, or to mean my when it literally says of me, or to mean our when it literally says of us, and so on. Anyway, this would mean, why don't you tell us these things? For you are in our house. Now, I haven't italicized the you here, as I just felt that the emphasis isn't strong enough for italics in English. For you are in our house. It sounds a bit weird, you know? So this sentence I've made illustrates that the emphasis of a nominative form of a pronoun being used isn't always strong enough to use italics in English. Okay, with that said, let's now go on to possessive adjectives, a related topic. Possessive adjectives are the adjectival versions of the personal pronouns. In English, they are my/mine, your or yours, singular, his, her, its, our or ours, your or yours, plural, and their or theirs. We use the second forms where these ones have a second form available, like the form with the S, for instance, or mine in the case of my/mine, when we are using the verb to be before it. For instance, the city is mine. That's when we would say mine rather than my. When we're saying something is someone's, that's when we use that second form. Otherwise, we use the first form, and the first forms listed here are more common than their second forms, okay? Now, we already know how to say the third person ones. We know how to say his, her, its, and their or theirs in Greek already. Namely, you use the genitive forms of houtos, ekeinos, autos, and chauton. Chauton is used when it's referring back to something which the subject owns. If you want to say that the subject the third person subject owns something, then you use a genitive form of houton. If it's somebody else, then you use one of these other words in the genitive. So that's how we indicate possession for the third person pronouns. That's how we say his, her, its, and their or theirs in Greek. But what about the words my/mine, your or yours, and our or ours? Starting with my/mine and your or yours singular, because once again we have separate adjectives in Greek for your or yours singular and your and yours plural. To say my/mine in Greek, you can either 1. Use the genitive of the personal pronoun, which would be mu, or if emphatic, emu, or you can use the possessive adjective emos, on, a regular 2-1-2 adjective meaning my or mine. We have already met emos, but we haven't met the others that we're going to look at, okay? So bear with me if you were getting impatient thinking, I already knew that, which I hope you weren't, okay? Do have some patience if I ever cover any of the same ground. Now, to say your or yours singular, you can either, similarly, use the genitive of the personal pronoun, which would be su, or you can use the possessive adjective sos, on, also a 2-1-2 adjective. So this is how you can say my/mine or your or yours singular in ancient Greek. Please do pause the video and note down these ways of doing so. What about the words our/ours and your or yours plural? Well, to say our or ours, you can either, as you might have guessed, use the genitive of the personal pronoun, which would be hairmorn, or you can use the possessive adjective hairmeteros, on. Also a 2-1-2 adjective, but this one has alpha in the feminine singular forms, where a normal 2-1-2 adjective has eta. Our paradigm for such an adjective is makros, you might remember. So it declines like makros. So you can use either of those strategies to say our or ours. To say your or yours plural, you can either use the genitive of the personal pronoun, which would be humorn, or you can use the possessive adjective humeteros, on. So like with the pronoun, there's only one letter difference between hemeteros and humeteros. So do watch out for that. And like hemeteros, humeteros is a 2-1-2 adjective with a stem ending in ro, and therefore the feminine singular forms use alpha rather than eta. It declines just like makros does. Please do pause the video and note down this information about how to say our or ours in ancient Greek and how to say your or yours plural in ancient Greek. Now, before you do some practice with these personal pronouns and possessive adjectives, there is just one more thing I have to tell you that I would like you to note down about the possessive adjectives. And that is, if you use the genitive of the personal pronoun to indicate possession, then you don't deploy that in the sandwich or repeated article constructions. You do not do that, okay? You do not put the definite article before the genitive of a personal pronoun. You don't deploy it in the sandwich or the repeated article constructions, in other words. However, you do use the article with the possessive adjectives. So if you want to indicate possession using one of these possessive adjectives, except when you're saying something is someone's, then you use the definite article. So if you wanted to say, for instance, our house, then you would say her metera oikia, or her oikia her metera. You would deploy it in the sandwich or the repeated article construction. So, if you go for the genitive strategy with any of these pronouns, then you don't use the sandwich or repeated article construction. If you go for the possessive adjective strategy, then you do use the sandwich or the repeated article construction. Or in other words, with the genitive way, you don't have the definite article before that word. With the possessive way, you do have the definite article in either the sandwich construction or the repeated article construction. I hope that's clear. Please do pause the video and note down that information. Genitive, no sandwich or repeated article constructions. Possessive, you do put it in the sandwich or the repeated article constructions, unless you're saying that something is mine, for example. Okay, there's actually just one more thing before you do some practice with these words, and that is examples of possessive adjectives in sentences. This sentence says, Her se polis nun estin emer. So, this says, the ser polis. Now, ser is the feminine nominative singular form of sos, which means your, singular, okay? And in English, we don't say your city, we just say your city. So although the possessive adjectives are used with the definite article before them, as I've just extensively described, we don't actually translate it in English. We can't, in fact. It's wrong to say your city, we just say your city, okay? Your city, nun estin, is now emer, mine. Your city is now mine. Next, we have ara toploion hermon pileite. This means, is it the case that, literally, pileite, you plural love, toploion, the ship or the boat, hermon. Hermon means of us. So it says, is it the case that you plural love the ship of us? But we'll more naturally say that as our ship. And you can see that hermon has not got the definite article before it. It's not going in the sandwich construction or the repeated article construction, unlike if we use the possessive adjective, in which case we'll use one of those two constructions. So this says, more naturally, do you love our ship? Thirdly, we have hoi hemeteroi stratiotai eisin iskuroteroi don humeteron. This says, our soldiers, but we would just say our soldiers, eisin are, iskuroteroi, comparative adjective, stronger or mightier, don humeteron. A genitive of comparison here, than your, is what it literally says. But we understand the word soldiers again from the context, than literally, your soldiers. But in English we can't put the there, we would just say, our soldiers are stronger than, and we could say, than your soldiers or than yours. That is another place we use the S form in English, in comparisons, where we drop the noun. That is actually it. In English, we use the alternative forms, the forms with S at the end, like yours and theirs, when we don't have the noun, when the noun is understood, okay? Or when you have that word as the complement of the verb to be. I know English intuitively, okay, so I don't know all of the rules of English grammar explicitly, but those are the two cases that have now come to mind. So this says, our soldiers are stronger than yours. Finally, we have diatite ymei gunaiki biblia didos, meaning, why? Didos, you give or you are giving. You singular, that is. Biblia, books. De ymei gunaiki, literally, in the dative, to thee, my wife. But once again, we don't say the thee when we've got a possessive adjective or a genitive of possession. So we would just say, why are you giving books to my wife? Without the word thee before my wife. So this says, why are you giving books to my wife? Or why do you give books to my wife? With that said, you can now do some practice with these personal pronouns and possessive adjectives. I've created 8 Greek sentences for you to translate into English. All of them use either a personal pronoun or personal pronouns or a possessive adjective. Please do pause the video and translate these sentences into English. Okay, let's now go through the answers. I'm not going to explain the answers thoroughly, so if you have any questions, please do post them in the comments below. The first one is Oi moi, eme blepusin ekenai hai korai. Here you should have put, oh no, those girls are looking at me. Or, oh no, those girls look at me. Or words to that effect. Now, the crucial point with regard to our focus was that eme is me in the accusative, and it's the emphatic form. And here you could emphasize it by putting the pronoun in italics. So that's what I did. And if we want to beautifully illustrate this sentence, we can do so with this image. Oi moi, eme blepusin ekenai hai korai. Oh no, those girls are looking at me. The thing is though, it's not a bad thing, my G, okay? It's a good thing. So why are you freaking out? Why are you saying oi moi? Okay, embrace it. That's my advice to this chap here. Number 2 is diati υλμεῖς αποκτείνεται, meaning, why are you killing us? Crucially, with regard to our focus, υλμεῖς is the accusative form of ἡμεῖς, so it means us, the direct object of the verb αποκτείνεται, the verb you plural kill or you plural are killing. You could have said, why do you kill us? That would also have been an acceptable translation. Thirdly, we have χωνεάνεας λέγει χοι μπάρμπαροι τεν χεμέτεραν κόμεν διαπτεϊρούσιν, meaning, the young man says, the barbarians are destroying our village. Now, the word our here was the possessive adjective χεμέτεραν. I hope you spotted that and translated it correctly. Fourthly, we have ho pulax hemin proston peiraea akolute. Here you should have put, the guard is accompanying us to the Piraeus, or the guard is following us to the Piraeus. Crucially, we had hemin here, which is the dative of ἡμεῖς. It's in the dative here, not because it's meaning to or for, but because the verb akoluteor takes its object in the dative case. The person that someone accompanies or follows goes in the dative. Fifthly, we have soi ou pisteior kleptes gar kai poneus e, meaning, I do not trust you, for you are a thief and a murderer. Now, the crucial point with regard to our focus was soi. Soi is the dative of su. Here it's in the dative because the verb pisteuo takes its object in the dative. Okay? Excellent. Let's do 6. 6 is idou anthropos ton emon hippon klepte. Aroista auton? Meaning, look, a man is stealing my horse. Do you know him? Perhaps I should have rendered this full stop as an exclamation mark, because otherwise this is, look, a man is stealing my horse. Do you know him? It sounds a bit, it's very matter of fact, this second sentence here. Excessively so. I think most people will be shouting if they were witnessing a man stealing their horse. They probably also wouldn't be asking their companion if they know the guy. They'll probably be running after the guy. So I don't know who's saying this, okay? I did make this sentence, but I don't invent a rational context, okay? Sometimes the context is a bit wild and wacky, or unknown, potentially irrational. So please forgive me for that. Anyway, oyster, in case you were wondering, is an irregular verb that we'll meet in the future. It's the verb oida, the verb to know. Oida is an irregular verb, like ỵmεῖς is irregular, so is oida. We have to learn its conjugation independently. Anyway, oyster is you singular, know. Now, our crucial point, the crucial point, with regard to our focus, was emon here, which is the possessive adjective my, sandwiched in between ton and hippon. So I hope you got that in your translation. Seventhly, we have pas perses aphemon apotreche. Here you should have put every Persian runs away from us, or every Persian is running away from us. Now, crucially, with regard to our focus, we have hermon. Now, hermon is in the genitive here because it's being put in the genitive by the preposition apo. Apo, however, has been not only elided, but the pi in apo has undergone a transformation. It's become a phi because of the fact that a rough breathing comes straight after it. Remember that if a pi or a tau is left at the end of a stem after a elision takes place, and the next word begins in a vowel or diphthong with a rough breathing, then the aspiration spreads onto the pi to make it phi, and onto a tau to make it theta, and onto a kappa to make it chi. Eighthly, we have hoi piloi hoi emoi ampore as moi didoasin, karin autois echo. Meaning, my friends give me amphorae, I am grateful to them, or I thank them. You could say my friends are giving me amphorae, and I am thanking them. That was an alternative translation. Now, with regard to our focus, the crucial point was emoi. My friends is hoi piloi hoi emoi. A pilos is a friend. Pilos is a 2-1-2 adjective, actually, meaning dear. But it's used substantively, or substantively, or substantively, so often that it's basically a noun, meaning friend. Because hopilos literally means the dear one, but it's used to mean the friend. So we can treat it as a noun as we did here. Now we've got the repeated article construction with emoi, meaning my. So my friends give amphorae to me, or give me amphorae. Karin autois echo. Now, this is a Greek idiom. Karin echo literally means I have grace, or I have gratitude. But it's used to mean I thank, I give thanks to, or I am grateful to. Okay? So literally this says, I have gratitude to them. But we would render that as I thank them, or I am grateful to them. the person you thank or are grateful to goes in the dative case. Before we move on, I just want to say I find this sentence very relatable, you know. I too have some friends that kindly give me amphorae, which I display on a marvellous set of virtual shelves. And I am very grateful to those friends, to those allies, to those supporters. I'm grateful to all of you. And I'm grateful for your likes and comments, so please don't forget to like and to comment and to subscribe and all of that. Okay, I've now got one more exercise for you, and it's an English to Greek translation exercise focusing on personal pronouns and possessive adjectives. Please do pause the video and have a go at translating these 5 English sentences into ancient Greek. Okay, I'm now going to reveal the answers, and I'm not going to be explaining them thoroughly, so if you have any questions, please do post them in the comments below. The first one is, why does the sailor hate you? And here, it's you plural, I've specified, okay? In Greek, this would be diati honautes ὑμεῖς mise. Crucially, ὑμεῖς is the correct form of you here, because you, not you individually, but you plural, whoever that you plural is, are the direct object of the sailor's hatred. And so, you needs to be in the accusative, and since it's you plural, we want the accusative form of ὑμεῖς, which is ὑμεῖς. So that's what we would put for this one. Number 2 is, I am the king, for I am the strongest of all men. Here you should have put something like, Basileus ἡμεῖς, ego gar iskeurotatos panton ήμι. Now, with regard to our focus, the crucial point was actually putting ego here, the nominative form of the pronoun I, in order to reflect that emphasis, which we've got in English from the italics. For I am the strongest of all men. For some reason, the speaker is emphasizing that it is he who is the strongest of all men. Now, with regard to of all men, you could have just said panton, you could have said panton anthropon or panton andron. I've used panton substantively here. Thirdly, we have, my slaves are clever, but your slaves are foolish. Here, you should have put, hoi men emoi douloi eisi sophoi, hoi de soi douloi eisi moroi. Or, hoi men douloi mu eisi sophoi, hoi de douloi su eisi moroi. The reason I've given an alternative translation here is because you could have used the genitive forms of the personal pronouns instead of the possessive adjectives. Now, the possessive adjectives I've deployed in the sandwich construction. You could have deployed them in the repeated article construction. Now, in the sandwich construction, they don't technically have an article directly before them. However, they do have the article before them, except for the men, which often intervenes. Particles often intervene and get in the way of words which would otherwise be next to each other. The men and the de are getting in the middle of what would otherwise be a lovely pairing. Now, if you did opt for this first strategy, I should note that you could have missed out the word douloi the second time, because the Greeks often omit nouns, or words in general in fact, when they're understandable from the context. So you could have just said hoi de soi eisi moroi. Fourthly, we have the sentence, every woman loves our city. One way you could have translated this is Parsaguna ten chemeteran polin pile. Now, I should say you could have had chemeteran in the repeated article construction instead of the sandwich construction. And the alternative way of translating this, instead of using hemeteran, would be to use the genitive of the personal pronoun. So you could have said pasa gune ten polin hemon pile. Those are the two ways that you could have said this in general. However, there is quite a lot of room for variety. Like I said, you could have had this possessive adjective in the repeated article construction. Moreover, you could have had the units of this sentence in a different order. You could have had pasa gune at the end. You could have had ten hemeteran polin at the start, etc. The word order, in terms of the units of this sentence, is flexible. Fifthly and finally, we have the Spartans are now helping us. We are grateful to them. Here you should have said, Hoi lacedaimonioi chemin nun boetusin, karin autois echomen. Now, for us, we needed to say chemin because the verb to help, boeteor, takes its object in the dative case. So that's why we wanted the dative form of ἡμεῖς here. And we had to use the idiom karin echor, I have grace or I have gratitude to someone, to say we are grateful to them. Now, to say we are grateful to them, we had to change it to echomen, for we are grateful to them. We have gratitude to them. So that's what we had to put. Now you could have said doutois or ekenois instead of autois. You could have used one of the demonstrative pronouns to mean to them. With that said, we can now summarize our learning for lesson 53. Today we've learned 4 new pronouns, although the first one we had seen before a little bit. Those are εγώ, meaning I or me, σου, meaning you singular, ἡμεῖς, meaning we/us, and ὑμεῖς, meaning you plural. We learned how these pronouns decline. What's more, we also learned 4 new possessive adjectives, although we did kind of already know the first of these. We learned emos, meaning my/mine, sos, meaning your/yours singular, hemeteros, meaning our/ours, and hymeteros, meaning your/yours plural. In addition, we learned that when it comes to the personal pronouns, possession can be expressed either by using the genitive form of the personal pronoun or the relevant possessive adjective. And we learned that if we're going to use the genitive form of the personal pronoun, then we don't have the definite article before it. Whereas if we use the relevant possessive adjective, then we do, unless it's the complement of the verb to be. That is to say, we don't deploy the genitive form of a personal pronoun in the sandwich or the repeated article construction, but we do deploy the relevant possessive adjective, when it's not the complement of the verb to be, in the sandwich or the repeated article construction. In addition, we learn the to-a noun, philos, meaning friend, which, as I said, is a 2-1-2 adjective meaning dear. However, it's used substantively so often that it is effectively a noun. Finally, we also learned a new idiom. We learned the idiom karin echor, which means to thank or to be grateful to, with the person you are thanking or being grateful to in the dative case. Literally, it means I have gratitude or I have grace, but it's used to mean I thank or I am grateful to. And speaking of that idiom, let me now say karin hymin echor. I am grateful to you. I thank you, plural, because there is hopefully more than just one of you watching. Hopefully this gets more than one view. Fingers crossed. However, even if it were just you watching, that's right, you, I would still be making these videos, okay? I would do it just for you. Now, I have put an image of some frogs on the screen, but there aren't just frogs here, okay? We've got frogs on one side and toads on the other. And we could caption this as follows. Ymeįs mewn batrachoi esmen, ymeįs de prunoi este. On the one hand, we are frogs. On the other hand, you, plural, are toads. So this says, we are frogs, but you are toads. That's what this chap right here is saying. He's saying, we are frogs, but you are toads. There you go. Interesting image. Hopefully it brightened your day. With that said, thank you very much once again for watching the video. This time I'm thanking you in English as opposed to ancient Greek. I wish you all the best, and I shall see you again next time.